Hello, everybody, and very welcome to the second part of our event, Choosing Green, a digital summit where we look at the green recovery in the Nordic region after the corona pandemic. And we are also warming up to the climate conference COP26, which will be held in Glasgow next year. In this part, we focus on the green transition and its consequences for Nordic jobs and skills. The session consists of 2 panel debates, 1 hour each. We have quite an interesting setup with stages all over the Nordic region, digitally connected to us and to each other. So I think I start by introducing our stages. We have, of course, the stage where we are in Copenhagen, and where I am the moderator. And my name is Mats Lindqvist. I come from the Nordic Council of Ministers and the Nordic Council. And we also have stages in, and I hope you can hear me, Helsinki. Do we see Helsinki? Yes, they are waving. We have in Oslo.
Idar is here.
Thank you very much. We have one in Reykjavik. Are you with us, Reykjavik? And we have one in Stockholm. Are you with us, Stockholm? Good. Thank you very much. The headline for the event is Surviving the Pandemic, Which Sectors Will Thrive and Who Will Suffer? But we will not only look at winners and losers, we will try very hard to look forward and see what kind of actions must be taken in the Nordic countries so that we can reach our ambitious goals and the Paris Agreement. I want to remind you that the Nordic Prime Ministers have set up a vision that the Nordic region is to be the most integrated and sustainable region in the world by 2030. And with those words, I give the floor to our keynote speaker, Jens Jarsbæk, who is a senior economist at Axel Future, a think tank for Danish business. Jens, be my guest.
Thanks a lot, Mats, and thanks a lot for the invitation to speak at this very interesting event. Now, I think that in your description, you posed some very interesting questions, and so I'll go through some of them at least. And I'll start with the question of whether we can actually afford to invest in the green transition here post-COVID-19. And I think if you look at governments, especially Nordic governments, the answer is yes. There's a window of opportunity here to invest in the green transition as part of the recovery of the economy. And also, when you look at the EU recovery package that's hopefully will get passed one day, a third of these funds will be used for the green initiative. So there's definitely there's money there for the governments, but there's also limits as to how many birds we can kill with one stone. So, for example, this pandemic is not causing any crisis in the construction sector. But the green transition needs a lot of construction work. Unemployment has soared, not in construction, but in services like tourism. But you cannot easily turn waiters or pilots or tourist guides into construction workers or green tech engineers or other skilled workers that we need to carry out these green investments. So this to me sets a limit as to how much we can combine the recovery with the green transition. So I think the focus will be on restoring jobs and restoring growth, and then the green transition will come second. Now, if we look at private business, I think the answer is less obvious. So the crisis, it reduces the appetite for business to invest, because a recession, it decreases the expected returns from your investment, and also on heightened uncertainty, it decreases expected returns. So to the extent that the green investments are non-essential for your business, this will put a damper on green investments and actually postpone the green transition from business sectors. On the other hand, investors and financial sectors are increasingly focusing on the sustainable development goals. So this, of course, creates some incentives for business to choose green alternatives. And if you, as a business, are looking at replacing a piece of machinery, there still may be a positive business case for choosing the green alternative instead of the old ones, despite COVID-19. And this is actually quite important because most of the investments that are needed for the green transition, they lie in the private sector. So we definitely need business and investment environment to get back to better days. But we should also remember that this is not a new financial crisis. So the financial sector is doing quite all right. And this, to me, tells me, well, there may have been a postponement in the green transition, but it's definitely not been cancelled. So how will the world look like post-COVID-19? So you pose a question, will mainly green business survive? Well, to me, I'm not convinced that the COVID crisis is a green game changer. So I think that the only major industry that will suffer long-term damage is tourism. And tourism, I think 3/4 of carbon emissions from tourism comes from transportation, and it basically only amounting to around 5% of global energy-related emissions. So, of course, traveling will be subdued for long, but this will not be the thing that will solve the climate crisis. But I think definitely that the pandemic will drive some change, and I think that e-commerce is one example. And I think e-commerce momentum will continue, but is this actually a win or a lose for the climate? I think here we have to look at transportation patterns and means. So one point is this last mile delivery. What will the climate impact actually be when we no longer go to the shops, but we go to the delivery hub, or we get the goods delivered to our own home? And also, if you think at transportation from the factory to wholesaler onto retailers, we sort of skip a middleman when we choose not to use the retailer, but maybe the retailer as a hub is actually a more cost-effective way of transportation because they buy large quantities. So to me, if these are these pandemic trends actually a pro or a con for the climate? I'm not convinced. I think maybe some of these trends will actually increase carbon emissions. But I think that regardless of COVID-19, I think we will see that all sectors will be affected by the green transition. And I think that a key challenge for many Western companies will actually be on how to control Scope 3 emissions. So these are the emissions that are sort of outside the company walls through the entire value chain. So as domestic energy supply, it turns to renewables, and as production process emissions, they are taxed. The next step for Western companies is to set goals for suppliers upstream. So your suppliers set goals for demanding that they use renewable energy, and also set goals for your retailers downstream. So how do they dispose of your product? How is this a recycling product? And I think that in this respect and in many others, I think that competitiveness post-COVID-19 will depend on supply chains. And if we look beyond Scope 3 emissions, I think that the focus will be on flexible supply chains and supply chains that are not dependent on a single point in your supply chain, especially one that is far off in China, for example. So this will likely lead to a regionalization of trade as opposed to globalization. And this is not a new thing, and COVID-19 is just something that is pushing this. But think of robots, think of 3D printing, and definitely think of the US-China trade war. All these things have already started a movement of shortening supply chains and regionalizing trade. And I think this will lead to more local productions around the world, serving markets that are smaller in scale but larger in numbers. And this will be challenging when you need to control scope 3 emissions, for example. So my last point, where does all this then leave the Nordics? Well, with Joe Biden in the White House, or coming in the White House, I think that global cooperation will definitely get some much needed help. But there are still risks of trade wars, and I think that Europe may even be dragged further into a battle with China, because Biden wants to confront China, but he will not do it alone like Donald Trump did. He will do it with allies, such as the EU. And I think my fear is also that this crisis will turn to or lead to more protectionism. I think because there's a call for domestic supply of certain products, it seems like an easy solution. And we've already seen this, and we've seen it in Europe. But my fear is that this will stick and actually even fuel a new wave of calls for repatriation of production. So I think that there's still even a growing need for the Nordics to work together and work together on global cooperation, on free and fair trade, on human rights, on a digitalization that respects our privacy. And this has to take place also in the WTO, in the WHO, the Paris Agreement, the UN, and of course also in the EU, for those of us who are in that club. And with that point, I'll leave the floor back to you, and thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jens, for a most interesting speak. I think this will be a very good starting point for the panel debate, which is due in a few minutes. Jens will be in the audience during the whole event, so if there's some questions to him, there might be some time to answer them later on. Thank you very much, Jens. And now it's time to turn to Nina Aagaard, who is the COO of the Nordic Innovation. She is here beside me, and to Henrik Norman in Helsinki. Henrik is the CEO at the Nordic Investment Bank. I hope, Henrik, that you can hear us. And both Nina and Henrik will give us a brief Nordic perspective on the keynotes. Nina, if I start with you, what are your immediate Nordic reactions to the keynotes?
Well, from the Nordic point of view, I think that COVID-19 is a game changer. The epidemic showed us, all of us, that we have taken a lot of things granted. And now we start to understand the need for resilience and the urgency to react and act. And I agree, we see also many sectors and companies suffering, and we see others as well flourishing. But I think that in this era of climate emergency and the urgent social changes like the demographic squeeze, and now the epidemic and the consequences, we need to think that if we want to ensure the Nordic welfare model and even develop it further, we need to implement system-level changes, and we have to start rethinking our economies, the structures, and how to finance the future. And therefore, I think the Nordic Vision 2030 is very important. Integrated and sustainable are the elements for a resilient future region. Green transition is more than implementing new technologies. It's about transformative thinking, breaking silos, creating new types of jobs, and enabling more inclusive and economically sound region.
Sounds like you put a lot of pressure on the public sector.
Yes, right? Well, I come from the public sector. So in my opinion, the public sector has a huge responsibility and opportunity to support the green transition by focusing on the competitive edge of our region, laws and regulations, because there lies a lot of drivers for new business models and innovations, but also possibilities to drive the transition, not only green, but more value-based economic to take it.
I think we stop there and go to Henrik in Helsinki. I hope that you hear me, Henrik. What are your immediate comments on the keynotes from your point of view, financial Nordic point of view?
Two very good keynote speeches, or two. So I don't disagree on a lot, which is a bit boring, so I don't have any sharp viewpoints here. I'll just like to add, I don't think that we can put the COVID or the green transition into a bubble. We also have to think about all the problems that were facing us and challenges that were facing us before COVID. If we have talked about trade war, immigration, also gender gaps, also the young generation, perhaps they are falling behind in this, climate change and technological revolution. So I actually do slightly disagree with you, Jens. I still think the public sector can do something, even though I admit it's not within the law, it's not within job creation, but we need to change the way the public sector works. Let's take a very simple thing. Grid, for instance. If you don't get a better electricity grid in the Nordic region, it will be very difficult to electrify. Okay, that means that we have to start planning now. Perhaps we even have to discuss the democratic process, because if we don't get the good grid system, and we can see there's bottlenecks, we cannot reach the targets. I think the other thing which we should discuss is, you are saying that job growth is first and the green transition comes second. In a way, I buy it on the short term. Longer term, I think really we have to have these two things go hand in hand. Because if we don't get this right, that people feel they are included in the green transition, the same thing could happen to green transition as happened to globalization. Globalization took 1 billion people out of poverty. If this becomes unpopular, the green transition don't get the support of the people it will hurt, or then we will have a situation like the US where half of the voters more or less voted for Trump, and then we can forget all about our highbrow dreams of a Nordic fantastic green region.
Thank you very much, Henrik. And I'm sure we will get back to what you said a little bit later, but I want to thank you both now for these comments, and we will have the pleasure to have you both in the panel discussion, which is coming up in a few seconds. But before we start the panel debate, let me just briefly introduce the panelists. We have here in Copenhagen, we have Anne Høie Simonsen, Senior Director on Climate Policy at the Confederation of Danish Industry. And we have, of course, Nina, as I already told you. In Helsinki, we have Henrik, whom you already know, Henrik Norman, and in Iceland, we have Rund Gunsteinsdottir, Managing Director from Festa Center for Sustainability in Iceland. I hope you can hear us well. Welcome. And then we have also in Iceland, Sigurdur Loftur-Tulasius, Environmental Engineer and Youth Representative in the Icelandic Climate Council. Hope you also can hear us well. And in Norway, in Oslo, we have Idar Kreutzer, who is the CEO at Finance Norway. Welcome to you too, and I hope you also hear us. And last but not least, in Stockholm, Cecilia Tenford Toftby, who is a member of the Swedish Parliament and also the Nordic Council. I hope you can hear us. Fine, I can see you there, fine. And once again, very welcome to all of you. Before we start the panel debate, I just want to say that in the end of the debate, we will have you will have possibility to ask some questions in the audience here and in Helsinki, and also online. And if you are watching us online, you have to go into our Facebook event named Choosing Green, and there you can write down your answers. So, my dear panelists, now it's your turn. I would like to start with a comment that our keynote speaker, Jens, said. He said that after the COVID-19, the focus will still be to restore jobs and growth. The green transition will come second. But the green transition isn't cancelled, it's only postponed. So my question is, what can the Nordic countries do to get back on track as soon as possible? How can we make sure that more and more businesses and companies invest in more sustainable solutions and the green transition, maybe even more than before the corona? And I would actually like to start with Anne beside me here.
Thank you. Well, as a representative of business life, I think it's very important to acknowledge that this green transition is a train that won't stop. Perhaps it will be a bit delayed, as you pointed to, due to COVID-19, but not necessarily. When change comes, sometimes you change faster. So I think it's important that in the stimuli packages that all Nordic countries are looking into, that you think green. You have to have a sustainable business life also after COVID-19, or you will be more vulnerable in the future also. So I would expect governments actually to focus on the green things too. And I think we should cooperate about it in the Nordic countries.
Is there anybody else in the panel who wants to comment on this? We have, I think we have, is that Reykjavik? Yes.
Yes.
Hi. Sigurður Loftur-Thulasius. Sigurður, the floor is yours, sorry.
Hi everyone, and thank you for this panel and discussion. I think it's only wishful thinking that a global pandemic will somehow magically give us a green transition. And the green transition won't happen by itself. And I took a look at the numbers for how much have the global emissions and European emissions been reduced as due to the COVID-19 crisis. And there was a recent article in Nature where a team of scientists have found out that global emissions reduced by 8.8% in the first half of 2020 compared to the first half of 2019. But as soon as restrictions go away, then this reduction disappears or is reduced. And if you look at Europe as a whole, Europe and UK, the European Union and the UK, then at the highest reduction that we saw was 26% reduction in the emissions in April 2020 compared to 2019. But what do you think the newest numbers are in September? It's actually 0% reduction. It's actually 0.3% increase in emissions in 2020 compared to 2019. So we are clearly seeing that the reduction that we saw due to the COVID crisis disappears as soon as the restrictions disappear, and it's not long lasting. So we cannot depend on the crisis to somehow solve our problems. The climate crisis is coming, we have very little time, and every hesitation has consequences for future generations, for our children, young generations. And we need to act fast. And even if you look at the governmental spending, I mean, I only looked at Iceland, but Iceland has spent around 100 billion ISK, Icelandic krona, in actions, measures against the pandemic, and only half a billion, so 0.5% into direct climate-related measures, so 0.3%. I mean, that's nothing. Europe is planning on doing much better, a third, I heard. But so the actions, at least here in Iceland, are not making this green transition happen, and we need to do much better to safeguard the green transition and not let this pandemic, stop it or halter it. So
thank you, Sigurður. Very strong message, I think, and I see that Idar is signing with his hand, and I really thought, Idar, that this is something for you. Could you comment on this quite strong message and not so optimistic, I would say?
Yes, thank you very much, Mats, and Jens, thank you very much for thought-provoking keynote. obviously, we should not base ourselves on fairy tales and think that by some magic the necessary green transition will accelerate all by itself under a pandemic that puts our societies under pressure. I mean, the arguments for being cautious and realistic they are very strong. Having said that, let me share with you two observations that might represent a glimmer of some hope into the situation. One is that, of course, it's right that what Jens says, that given the increased risk, everything else being equal, investor willingness to invest will be reduced, but everything else is not equal. I mean, we are facing massive stimulus packages from all over the planet, and we have record low interest rates. And we see the effects on the surprisingly strong equity markets. We see the effects on the relatively strong fixed income markets, and we definitely see the willingness of investing in infrastructure, as Henrik correctly says, will be important in the transition going forward. So observation number one is that the stimulus packages seems to have an effect in stimulating willingness to invest. Observation number two is that, I mean, given that we have had an election in the US, if the capital markets have voted now, it seems to be the case that they are voting green. If you look at the investor appetite for so-called green investments, I mean, it's enough to look at Ørsted, the Danish successful company that transformed Dong Energy, being one of the favorites of the global investor market these days. I have seen surveys saying that on average, you have a price book now on green investments or green companies in the equity markets on 20 times higher than price book of typical brown equities in the market. So if we combine the two observations that the stimulus packages are stimulating investment willingness, and that capital markets have really opened their eyes for the possibilities in so-called green or sustainable investments, I think that's an opportunity that we should utilize. And it is important that public sector stimulus, including public procurement, is used to demonstrate that public sector will work for an accelerated green shift to stimulate the private sector willingness to invest. So yes, we should be cautious, but there are glimmers of hope.
Thank you very much, Ida. And I think I'll give the word to Stockholm and Cecilia, because we're talking a little bit about the public sector here now in Ida's speech, and Ida gave us a little bit of hope. Can you also can you continue with the optimistic way that this is something that we can solve, and you can do something as a politician?
Of course, the politicians have to do something about it, and as someone said, the COVID isn't going to change the world into a greener place. But at the same time, now we have the time to sit down and discuss it. And my hope is that green will be the new normal. Right now, we are kind of putting economical growth against green growth. That does not have to happen. We have to realize. Did I lose the sound now?
No, it's okay.
It's okay.
We can hear you.
Because I don't think that we should not see green investments and other investments as opposites. They are the same thing. And I think green people out there, they are afraid of their jobs. They're afraid of how they're going to live their lives. We have to make sure that the new normal is the green normal. And I think that is going to happen. But Henrik Norman said something that we politicians think about all the time. And that is, if we make the wrong decisions, or if we make decisions and don't explain for the people why we are doing it, we're going to lose their support. And then it doesn't matter how many right decisions we make, because if the people out there don't understand why we are doing the things, why we are putting in new policies, they're going to vote for someone else the next time. And then we're going to have to take a step back, and we don't have the time to do that. So I think for the politicians, we have to make sure, of course, that we make the right decisions, but at the same time, we have to make sure that the people that we're making the decisions for understand why we are doing it. Why are we making these decisions? Because people out there, they want to know that they can keep on living their lives, maybe not in the same way as earlier, but in a good way. They want to see their children growing up in a good place. And it's the politicians' responsibility to see that this happens. And when it comes to public procurement, we do have a very, very important tool as politicians, because we can say this is what we want to happen. We don't have to say this is the technique we want to see, but we want to we have to say this is the result we want to see. And we can have whips, and we can have carrots, and we have so many tools in our toolbox, and we have to use it, but we have to use it in the same time as we explain for the people where we want to go. What is the goal with using these tools?
Thank you, Cecilia. And I will go back to what you said about getting everybody on board, and a little bit similar what Henrik said, because I think that's a very, very important question. How do we get everybody on board? Many people are just concerned about paying the bills, getting food on the table, paying the rent and the mortgage. And they might fear that the green transition threatens their everyday life. So what can we practically do to make sure that everybody is on board? And I would like to give this easy question to Rund in Iceland. Are you ready for this?
Ready for this, thank you. And it's been great to listen to all the discussions and debates throughout this morning. And I think what I want to say on this point is, I think part of the challenge is embedded in the question that we stated out in the beginning about sectors. Which sectors will thrive and which won't? Because I think that we really should grab the chance now, which COVID is providing us with, to reset the world in a sustainable way. And sustainability has to do with people, profit, and planet. Profit meaning how we create and invest the profit that we make. And I think that the sustainability is key, because it's not just about green recovery or renewable energy. We all want sustainability. I think that the social consensus is clear. You stated out in the beginning that the Nordics have decided to become the most sustainable and integrated region in the world. So the vision is clear. And so I think that the challenge that I want to underline on that note is that somebody mentioned silos before. So I think that talking about sectors, we need to step out of the silos. We need to bridge the gaps that we have created between countries, between regions, between disciplines, because the challenges that we are faced with are global, and they don't honor any boundaries. They have to do with moving from a linear to a circular economy. They have to do with taking decisions today, whether they are thought long-term or short-term, which have the sole intention of leading to a sustainable outcome. So one of the things I want to also leave us with on that note is, if we are thinking about today to invest in something, whether we are a public or private sector, that is not sustainable for people, the planet, and the running of companies, then I would just like for us to stop and think for a little while, like, why is that justifiable? Why are we even thinking about investing in something that is not going to be regenerative in a sustainable way today, next year, and for the coming generations?
Thank you, Rund. A very good answer, but I didn't really get the answer to my question. So now I will ask all panelists, is there anybody who wants to try to answer it? How do we get everybody on board? Yes, we have one in Iceland. It's Sigurður. The floor is yours. Okay. Try again, please.
microphone went wrong.
There is.
How do we get everybody on board? I'm not sure if I have a complete answer, but I'd like to say as a representative of young people and youth, and as a climate activist, I can say that the young generation is at least very ready for the actions that need to be taken and the green transition. And as you can see, the climate strikes around the world, well, I mean, they're not going on as much in the pandemic, but you can see these people that you have a lot of people backing up the green transition. And as a politician, you should be able to go ahead and do this, even harsh measures to tackle this problem. And I agree also with Cecilia that we should use the whole toolbox, and the public sector should use everything in their toolbox, bans, incentives, taxes, fees, restrictions, use all of the tools, because if we want to reach carbon neutrality in 2035, 2040, 2050, we really need to act fast, and we need to see 5% reduction in yearly emissions every year to be able to reach something like that, at least 5% and even more. And that's what we want to see. And but to get everybody on board, we have to ensure that this is a fair transition and that it doesn't affect marginalized groups or poor people more than others. And we have to, if we are putting in taxes or fees, we have to ensure that we are not increasing the load, but just shifting taxes, making the incentive, ban diesel and gasoline cars, but at the same time subsidize the carbon neutral alternative. And then the same for energy, restrict, say, fossil fuel import even. And then on the other hand, subsidize or tax perhaps, and then subsidize renewable energy. So we really have to, when we're putting these actions forward, we have to ensure that we're not somehow putting load on people that stand badly. So, and that's the way of getting people on board. And also, I'd like to end this with, in getting people on board, we also have to present this carbon neutral future that we want to see, the fossil fuel free future, as the positive image and scenario as it is. I mean, can you imagine having no noise on the streets, no soot emissions, healthier food, healthier planet, and being in harmony with nature? I mean, it's a beautiful picture, this carbon neutral society that we have to reach. And that's
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now I would like to. This is a Nordic event, so I try to take down it to narrow it down to a Nordic perspective again. And Anna, you said something about we need Nordic cooperation in your first comment. Do you have any idea of how we could do this with a Nordic cooperation to move forward in a sustainable way?
Well, we all already cooperate to a large extent. For example, our electricity systems are integrated, and that's a picture or illustration of what way to move. The Nordic voice, the Nordic mafia in the EU is well known. We align the different storylines and political directions, both in the political life, but also in business life. I have a past in the Danish government offices with climate, and now I do exactly the same thing just with my business colleagues in the Nordic countries, and that's a very strong liaison for the future work. Last but not least, we have a tradition of having a very close dialogue between business life, civil society, and political life. And that is something that we could do even more, and also export the idea to the rest of the world, because that is one of the ways to answer your former question, to not get into opposition to everybody, that everybody actually integrated in the discussions, have a voice, and actually recognized.
And Nina is nodding. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think
elaborate?
I think it's difficult to not to agree. But I would also take up one point that actually Idar Gröther in his report takes, and this is the access to risk capital and acting as a one investment region. And it's back to the branding thing. I think that's also very important to keep in mind.
Yes, and now we mentioned Idar Gröther. I see Henrik there. Yes, Henrik, you say something first, and then I have a question for Idar.
Yeah. I would just like to comment on the risk capital. The problem today is actually that there is a lack of investable problems. If you take Denmark, where our moderator is sitting, if you go into the central bank statistics, you can see that business today are placing more deposits than they are taking out loans from banks. That has not happened since I don't know when, the last 20 years. That's a sign of lack of investable problems. Number two, for these money, they are getting a negative return. And if you look at zero interest rates, most things actually pay off. If you discount it with 0%, you get a very good return. So the key point is the word we heard before, the whip and the carrot. And all are always talking about taxes, that can change behavior. And I agree, let's tax carbon more, but then let's give tax depreciations to companies that want to invest over the next 2 or 3 years so they can depreciate faster. We have to do something. The capital is there, but there is no investment taking place. That's the issue.
Thank you, Henrik. And we talk about risk capital. I turn to Idar because Idar, one key element in the green transition is innovation capability. That was a hard word to pronounce. So I turn to Idar Gröther. You wrote a report for the Nordic Council of Ministers in 2018. Headline was An Integrated and Effective Nordic Ecosystem for Innovation and Green Growth, where you gave 16 proposals how to move forward on a Nordic level. What messages and answers can we find in your publication that might be useful in this situation where we are where we try to boost the innovation activity and a sustainable development in the Nordic region?
Thank you, Mats. Let me first say that it was a very, very interesting endeavor. I had more than 60 meetings with key people throughout the Nordic countries. And it clearly gave a picture of a region where the objectives are very similar, but and we like to think about ourselves as fairly integrated, and we have prime ministers saying that by 2030 we should be the most integrated region on the planet. But in fact, we see that on area after area, we still have significant potential for being more effective, integrate more, and getting more leverage out of the fact that we, in my opinion, is a fantastically interesting region to invest in. Looking at the numbers, I mean, we are probably the most digitized region in the world. Looking at what is happening in the financial markets, we are probably also the leading region in the world when it comes to sustainable finance. If you look at investor characteristics, we have strong institutions, well-functioning markets, and we have a relative political stability. So the investment case for investing in this region is strong. What I point to are a number of areas where we could integrate more, where, for instance, we should align relevant regulatory frameworks when it comes to innovation, entrepreneurship, startups, and growth companies. We should develop Nordic mandates for more of the financing mechanisms that's out there. We should try to develop one Nordic market when it comes to public procurement and opening up for all the bright ideas that we have in this market in each of the Nordic countries to find a larger market initially. And by doing this, we should do exactly as Nina says. We should build a much stronger profile in international capital markets, and I'm sure that we will attract investments. So we are on that journey, but it should be and could be accelerated, and the potential by doing that is clearly significant.
Thank you very much, Ida, and I'm sorry to say that we're running out of time. This was a very good closing remarks. I think I have 10 more questions to ask, but when there's no time, there is no time. So I think we take it sometimes later, maybe when we have the possibility. Thank you all, panelists, for an interesting, very interesting debate. But be sure to stay put, because we have there are coming up some questions from I think from the audience and also online from our viewers. So stay put for the questions. Okay. Time for questions. I see that we already have one who is interested to state a question. And please come up. We have a microphone here, so just come up and state your name and organization and your question, please.
Okay, my name is Noah. I'm from NGK. My question is: I really like the saying that we want green growth and economical growth going hand in hand. So my question is, what companies are actually taking this to heart, and what could the Nordic cooperation support?
I hope you heard this question also in the panels over there in our hubs, and I think Anne is here wanting to answer. Please.
Well, we already heard about Ruedstern, which took offshore wind from a small-scale project in the mid-90s to the largest value of any company ever in Denmark right now. That's one, but there are many more. Also companies that you might not think of today as green. You have companies producing concrete, for example, greening a lot of their processes because they know their customers would want that. And that is a way of growing green and growing economically. In Denmark, we had a cooperation between government and business in climate partnerships, 13 partnerships in very different areas, circular economics, but also production, agriculture, and a lot of different things. And they are actually pointing to the suggestions that might create economic and green growth. Very good question.
Thank you, Anne. I think Ida raised your hand, did you?
Yes, thank you. I mean, your question is of course an excellent one. And in addition to pointing in the direction of the companies being out there today as leading companies, I think it's even more important that we make it easier for you to find the answer yourself by stimulating reporting standards, by stimulating transparency, by integrating the EU taxonomy. So it's easier for the general public, that is easier for the retail investor, that is easier for everybody being actors in the market that wanting to make informed decisions to do exactly that. So by increasing transparency and sharing comparable information, it will be easier for you to find the answer yourself. And I think that is key to your question too.
Thank you very much, Ida. Are there more questions? There is an answer, I think.
Yeah, maybe the Nordic part, a very practical one. So we, for instance, at Nordic Innovation, we do work with the companies to give them competencies and knowledge how to turn their business into more green and circular business models. So that's one answer.
Thank you. Any more questions here or we have one here, have one in Helsinki also. Otherwise we take, I can't see anything on my monitor, so we take one question here. Please come up to the microphone and your name and organization, please.
Oops. Hello, my name is Sarah, and I have a two-in-one question. First of all, which sectors and businesses do you think we can make more sustainable in the future? Which are the most future-proof, so to say? And second of all, which sectors and businesses do you think we are the most competitive in? That's it.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody in Rund? Is this a question for you? Maybe?
So I think, again, I think this is a great question. There are many, many companies, for example, in innovation and technological development today that are either coming up or bigger companies that are integrating innovative thinking into their operations, which are really on a great track towards a more sustainable ways of doing things, whether it is in-house, whether it is coming up with new products and ideas, or whether it is the chain that leads to the rest of the world where you get your goods and services from. So I think that there are many companies coming up that are actually purpose-led. So they're focused on tackling climate challenges, for example. There are companies coming up and have been coming up which are really focused on growing inequality in the world. We have impact investment funds, and somebody said earlier that investment funds that have been focusing on the environment, social factors, and good governance, they fare better this year than traditional investment funds. So I think that part of the answer to your question is the companies that will be focusing on sustainable businesses, they will thrive after 5 and 10 years. But those who don't, they won't. So I think it's not just a question about sectors. And again, I think we need to cross the silos a bit more here, because the greatest innovations that we've seen, they actually cross disciplines and sectors, and they think outside the boxes that we've created. So I think follow innovation, technological development, and even traditional companies and family-owned companies. It's interesting because for some people, they are some of the most interesting business models because they have the permission to think long-term. Or you have boards that think about stakeholder economy, not just maximizing the profits for shareholders. So stuff like this, I think, is something that we will want to nourish and build up because these are the things that will thrive after 5 or 10 years.
Thank you. I think Cecilia I think you raised your hand, Cecilia, or am I right or wrong? Please.
I think one of the sectors that has to transform very quickly is the transportation sector, because I think even private businesses want to minimize their carbon footprint, and then they're going to want to have green transports, and this is a debate arranged by the Nordic Council of Ministers. So from the parliamentarians, I can make a wish, and that is that we will have a joint council of ministers when it comes from infrastructure, because we do see that we need, if we're going to become the most integrated region in the world, we are going to have to work more when it comes to our infrastructure, and we are going to have to work more closely when it comes to making our transportations go green, because today that's the sector that is letting out most of the CO2 and the carbon emissions, and we have to make a change there, and we have to make it quickly. And as politicians, this is an area, this is a sector that we actually can do something about, because we are the ones that are making the plans, we are the ones that are putting out the goals. So this is a sector that I think is one of the most important sectors to very rapidly transform from CO2 polluters to a green sector. And I think that when it comes to job creating, this is also a sector that is going to create a lot of jobs, and I think that the people is going to want to see this happening, no matter where they live in the Nordic countries.
Thank you, Cecilia. And we're running out of time, I'm sorry to say. I have one online question. I'm sorry, Sigurd, I can see you, but we take one more question online, and then we have to just stop. I'm sorry to say. And we have many questions here too. Sorry. We have one question online, and I'll try to read it. I just got it, so we'll see how it ends. The Nordic environment ministers want to make sure the countries have the right policy mix in terms of the green transition. Do they, in your opinion, or how could it be improved? Is there anybody who wants to answer this question? It isn't that easy, I think. Nobody is. I can't see any hands. Yes, Cecilia. You were number one.
Yes, to answer
briefly,
the last part.
Briefly, we have very little time.
Yeah, to answer the last part of that question, do we need more policies? Yes, we do. We do need to improve our policies when it comes to changing our economies into green economies, of course. And we do need more cooperation between the Nordic countries in order to get there. And this is past what's happening after the pandemic. I really do hope that the pandemic and the difference in how we have handled the pandemic will not create any obstacles in the further coming cooperation between our countries, because the Nordics, we have a very strong brand when it comes to going green, and we have to make sure that this brand is nurtured and is growing. And in order to do that, we have to increase the speed in getting our policies more green, and we have to make sure that the good Nordic cooperation that we have had for so many years is still well and living and thriving even after the corona pandemic has left us.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. I think those were the closing words for this panel debate, because, as I said, the time is running out. Thank you very, very much to all our participants here and out there in the other Nordic countries, and to the viewers, of course. But please stay tuned, because in a few minutes we continue this summit with a discussion on skills for sustainable development, a Nordic approach to the green future, with a keynote by Mr. Stefano Scarpetta, who is the Director for Employment, Labor and Social Affairs at the OECD. Thank you very much, and see you in a few minutes. Hello, everybody, and very welcome to continue following our event, Choosing Green, a digital summit where we look at the green recovery in the Nordic region after the corona pandemic and warming up to the climate conference COP26, which will be held in Glasgow next year. In this session, we focus on skills for sustainable development, a Nordic approach to the green future. We have the same setup as earlier today with the stages all over the Nordic region, digitally connected to each other. And yeah, well, without further words, I think we go right ahead to our keynote. And it is an honor for me to welcome our distinguished guests, our keynote speaker, Mr. Stefano Scarpetta, who is the Director for Employment, Labor and Social Affairs at the OECD. His directorate is in charge of labor market and social policy issues, as well as international migration and health issues. So, Mr. Scarpetta, I hope that you can hear me over there in Paris. And if you do, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can also hear me and see me.
Yes,
good
yes,
afternoon,
everything is okay.
Very good. Good afternoon to everyone. It's really a great pleasure for me to participate in this session. I think from the previous panel discussion, it is clear that the impact on the labor market of the COVID-19 crisis has been profound. For the OECD country as a whole, in April of this year, the unemployment rate saw an unprecedented 3 percentage point increase, reaching 8.8%, which is even higher than the peak that was reached after the global financial crisis. So basically, in a matter of 2 months of decline in unemployment that we observed in 10 years after the global financial crisis was completely wiped out. Since then, with the reopening of the economy in all of the OECD countries, we have seen the unemployment rate declining a bit, but the most recent information we have suggests that the unemployment rate is still at 7.3% in the OECD area. When we look at the European countries, including the Nordic countries, then we see that the unemployment rate did not rise sharply at the onset of the crisis, but has steadily increased and actually show very little sign of recovery in the past few months. In Sweden and in Finland, for example, the unemployment rate now stands at 9 and 8.4% respectively. While the increases have been more subdued elsewhere in the Nordic region, the unemployment rate has reached more than 5% in countries like Iceland and Norway, as you know, and above 6% in Denmark. If the impact on the economy and the labor markets of the COVID-19 crisis was unprecedented, so was also the policy response that all the OECD countries put in place. As you know, there's been trillions of dollars which have been committed to support workers, to support households, and to support firms. For example, the vast majority of the OECD countries have created or expanded the job retention schemes to protect jobs and livelihoods during the confinement and lockdown. There have been measures to support income for those most affected and also strengthen basic leave schemes. Now, unfortunately, we are still struggling to keep the virus under control. We know very well that a number of countries, including many European countries, have been forced over the past few weeks to reintroduce often strict containment measures, which certainly would have an impact also on our economies, on our labor markets. But I think, and this is why this session is extremely important, we have to think how we build back a stronger, more sustainable and resilient economy and society. We have to take steps to ensure that the recovery that we all hope is going to come soon will be not only job rich, but also will be green and inclusive. This is not only because, yes, the COVID-19 has been and still is, unfortunately, first and foremost a health crisis, but because next crisis, the one that may come in the future, may actually be linked to environmental challenges such as climate change, pollution, biodiversity loss, or ocean degradation. Now, the good news is that in the Nordic countries, but actually across a wide range of OECD countries, many governments have introduced green measures in their recovery packages. And a number of countries have recently strengthened their commitment to achieve net zero carbon emissions. In the EU, has put the European Green Deal as the heart of the recovery strategies, committing to spend at least 30% of its multi-year budget and recovery fund to achieve the EU goal of climate neutrality. These efforts are essential and I think can really help us moving toward a sustainable economy. But I think they have to be accompanied, and this is the core of this session, to measures in the labor market and on the skill front to actually accompany the associated transitions. Some of the work we have done at OECD modeling climate change mitigation policies suggests that there will be significant sectoral changes in the composition of employment, even though this reallocation might not be particularly large compared to the reallocation in labor we have seen already over the past decades. Fossil fuel industry are likely to experience the steepest employment decline, renewable energy industries the sharpest increase. For example, according to the International Renewable Energy Agency, worldwide employment in the renewable energy sector already increased from 7.3 million to 11.5 million from 2012 to 2019. At the same time, employment in other green sectors, such as energy efficiency and nature-related sectors, is likely to increase significantly going forward. Again, the International Energy Agency estimates that energy efficiency alone offers potential for up to 2.5 million new jobs per year worldwide as part of the recovery effort. The transition to a greener economy will require new skills, both for the newly emerging jobs, and there will be many of them, but also for the existing job that will be evolving, will be retooled. Why actually there are only few unique green skills, strengthening, in my view, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, the STEM skills would actually prepare many workers for the green jobs of today and of tomorrow. But this should be combined with retraining and upskilling programs to help those already into the labor market who are in declining brown sectors to actually move to the expanding green sectors. But actually to support them in job search assistance and counseling to help this transition from declining job to emerging job. Just to give you one example again, some recent work we have done at OECD using the big data suggests that job opening, the skill needed in some of the emerging jobs, for example, in some sectors related to climate change, actually have very similar skill to the one that are declining. We also have to be very wary of the disparities in jobs that may result from the green recovery. For example, jobs in the fossil fuel industries tend to be geographically concentrated, and many of them are actually low-skilled jobs. At the same time, older workers tend to be overrepresented in the most polluting industry. Yet it is precisely the low-skilled workers who are the least likely to participate in adult training programs across all of the OECD countries. Even when we look at the Nordic countries that tend to spend much more than many other OECD countries on adult learning programs, when we look at the disparities between access to formal and informal training for the low skill compared to the high skill, we do observe large differences. 31 percentage point in Norway, for example, 49 percentage point in Denmark. To close this gap in access to adequate training and retraining program, we need very much targeted action, including find some innovative way to reach out to the potential learners, some of whom might not feel that they need to participate in training to adapt their skills. We have to recognize the existing skills, some of which they might have developed during the working life. And we have to also create more diverse learning opportunities. I think it is also vital that we accompany very strong and targeted public policies with a close collaboration with the key stakeholders, of course with the employers, but also with the trade unions. I think there is a need of better, more effective collaboration across the different key stakeholders. Government alone cannot address these major challenges, can play a decisive role, but it needs the support of the social partner. This is, for example, this cooperation is what is highlighted in the Norwegian strategy for skill policy for 2017-2021. So dear participants, I think we are rightly focused on protecting our environment. We have also to make sure that we work at the same time on the labor market and on the skill policies to make sure that we can really facilitate the transition of workers from declining to emerging sector, but that we equip everybody, those in education, but those also already into the labor market with a skill which will be required in the new job, green job that are emerging. That I think are the essential element to make these recovery plans sustainable, greener, but also resilient. These are some of the observations I want to share with you and very much look forward to the panel discussion and to the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Scarpetta. Most interesting keynotes, and I'm certain it will be a very good, it will inspire our panel to a lively debate in a few minutes. It was a pleasure to have you as our guest and as our keynote speaker. And you are, of course, more than welcome to follow this event online if you only have the time. So please, Mr. Scarpetta, stay online and listen to the debate. And now I think it's time to turn to Johann Ruedstern in Norway. Johann is a researcher at FAFO, an Institute for Labor and Social Research in Norway, and he will give us a Nordic perspective on the keynote that we just heard. Johann is also a co-writer of a report that is very much in line with what we are discussing here today. The name of the report is The Nordic Future of Work, Drivers, Institutions and Politics, and it's a part of a 3-year project. And Johann is also working on a PhD on future working life and digitalization. So Johann, I hope that you can hear me there in Oslo. And if you can, so what are your comments on the keynotes? Do you agree with Mr. Scarpetta? And are there some issues that you would like to elaborate from a Nordic point of view? Are you there, Johann?
Yes, I can hear you very well. It's a pleasure to be here. I'll try to give a brief Nordic perspective. And let me start out by saying that the Nordic countries are obviously, as you know, highly integrated in the European and the global economies, so that in broad strokes, the issues raised by Mr. Scarpetta are very much essential also for the Nordic countries. In the three-year research project that you just mentioned, we have looked into the transition to a greener economy as one of 4 main global megatrends that will impact the Nordic models in the future years. In addition, we've looked at digitalization, obviously, demographic changes, and globalization. And then at the end of the project, the pandemic has obviously changed our outlook quite substantially, but crucially, it is not disconnected from the other megatrends. And indeed, it might accelerate and underline the developments that are already underway. For instance, it has already accelerated the digitalization of working life, and it has slowed down international travel, as this conference is an example of. It should also be a very strong catalyst for the transition to a greener economy. And as was pointed out, many countries, including the Nordic countries, have included strong green measures in their recovery packages. But then again, the Nordic countries are perhaps not as green as one might like in this respect. Consider, for instance, that in Norway, some of the recovery packages also include big tax breaks for the petroleum sector, and we are still quite far away from the targets of the Paris Agreement, so we will need to do much more in the future. As Mr. Scarpetta also noted, the shift to a green economy will have implications for jobs created and jobs lost, which is more my field. And when it comes to the jobs lost, it will obviously be in activities tied to fossil fuels, from Norwegian oil platforms to Swedish engine manufacturers. And in aggregate, these will be relatively small, modest, gradual transitions, yes, but on a local level, they can be quite different. Consider, for instance, when the oil prices now tumble and the tourists stay at home, a small local community on the west coast of Norway is hit quite instantly and quite hard. So that's when we need forceful policy measures, including the job retention schemes mentioned, other labor market support measures, and also forceful reskilling policies. Concerning the new and green jobs that are created, hopefully, these tend to be high-skilled jobs. And our research into the Nordic job and skill structure shows that a very high proportion of the net job growth over the past few decades have indeed come in these high-skill, high-wage jobs. That's in some cases a good thing, and one thing it does is to prepare us for the shift to a greener economy, but it also puts tremendous pressure on the education system, on skill policies, and as Mr. Scarpetta pointed out, it's essential that we increase the number of students in STEM educations. But the sad fact is that in the Nordic countries, the number of students or the share of students in these educations has stagnated, and we still have a very low female share. To end on a more positive note, we underline in our research that the Nordic models and the Nordic countries are comparatively very well positioned for the green transition. We have a highly educated workforce. We have very strong digital skills. We have labor markets that are broadly very well functioning with strong support measures. We have good public finances. We have highly organized working lives, and we have a tradition of bringing together stakeholders, including the social partners, when big decisions are being made. But we still need decisive political action, and we also need a good deal of ingenuity, innovation, and cooperation from both the private sector and the social partners, as well as the politicians.
I think, Johan, that we almost have to stop there because we have a very short of time. Have you much left?
Yes, that was indeed the end of my presentation. So I'll just end with the main message, which is never waste a good crisis.
Thank you very much. That was a good point at the end. Thank you for that. Thank you very much, Johan. We really would have wanted to have you with us also in the panel debate, but I think due to corona restrictions in Norway and Oslo, this is not possible, I'm sorry to say. But thank you very much, and goodbye for this time, and we move on in the program. Thank you, and let me introduce the panelists for today. We have Einar K. Holst, who is the Vice President of the Danish Trade Union Confederation here in Copenhagen. We have in Helsinki, Stefan Sundman, who is responsible for public affairs and media relations at UPM, a pulp and paper company. We have David Tulaksson, who is the Director of Policy at the Confederation of Icelandic Enterprise in Reykjavik. I think, yes. And we have Grete Nyckelmo, who is CEO of JA Norway, Ungt Entreprenørskap, Young Entrepreneurship. And we also have Nora Beroba from the World Economic Forum, Global Shapers Community, and member of the governing body of the European Youth Parliament should be with us from Sweden, I think. And once again, welcome to all of you. And to you in the audience, I say the same thing as I said last time. There is some time for questions in the end of the debate, and the same is for you online. You can go in, you can watch your Facebook event named Choosing Green and write down your questions there. So, dear panelists, we go to the debate. And I would like to start in the positive end, even though this might be a little bit difficult for me as I'm a former journalist, but I'll try. Listening to the keynotes, it seems like we already have the basic skills required for the green transition. What we need is retraining and upskilling. Those are keys to move forward in many cases. How do you comment on this? Are we prepared well enough in the Nordic countries? Do we already see enough retraining and upskilling happening here? Is there anybody who wants to start with this question as Einar is fast? So it's the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for inviting me here. Well, in Denmark, I'm proud to say that the parliament, with a big majority, said that we have to go green, and we have to go green by 70% in 2030. I think we could be proud of that, but that is not the only thing, because it should be done. And the challenge is, how do we do that? I think one of the speakers from Sweden talked about how can we be sure that this challenge is caught in the people. I think, and that's why we came up with a plan in the confederation in Denmark, saying how can we create and reach the target and ensure that there's a just transition, so that we don't make the mistake we did when we were talking about globalization. The elite was talking about globalization, and the people on the floor said, hey, what's in it for me? And I think it's one of the key elements, being sure that we can understand and we can tell what to do. And I can say, if we should reach this target, 70%, we will have to find 200,000 man-years in Denmark, more than we already have with the correct skills. Because a lot of this will demand skilled workers. And in Denmark, and I think it's the same thing in the Nordic area, there's an unbalance between labor and skilled workers and the academic world. We have a lack of skilled workers. I say 200,000 man-years is 4 or 5 times more than we need to build the biggest building in Denmark ever, the Coherent project. So we have to be sure that we have focused at having the skills. If we should want 500,000 cars on electricity, we have to renew Denmark's infrastructure in electricity totally. There's not a place in Denmark we don't have to dig to put down new cables and so on. So being sure that we have the skilled workers, being sure that we can renew a lot of skilled people, moving them from old industries. I think this is one of the biggest challenges to be sure that we can reach this target, having the people, having the hands, having the brains.
Thank you, Einar. But how do we get this skill, and how do we get these brains? Does anybody want to comment on that? Nora, do you have an answer for that in Sweden? Do you have these answers?
I mean, of course, there's not one answer to this, because as we know, the transition to a green economy is a whole society transformation. So maybe I can just divide up your questions into some smaller points. The first one is, I think, recognizing this whole society approach, which also means that institutions and stakeholders working on environmental and skills or education policies need further synergies and linkages to understand what are the skills needs that we need to meet. We also need a green skills collaboration, which is a multi-stakeholder approach because a common feature in now the institutional setup around green skills is the weak connection between those that are working on skills and education and those that are working on environmental policies or economy. I think one aspect is also the labor rights and just transition, because of course we need to talk about this skills issue, and upskilling and reskilling is at the core of that. But we also must look at how do we make sure that our green transition is not done on the expense of workers in high polluting industries. How do we transform social and social safety nets for workers transitioning away from these jobs, which is of course a longer process than just the 6 weeks course. What is the support that we offer during that time? I think in this regard, the Nordic countries are uniquely placed with actual strong social safety nets, but that could be expanded in this regard. Because we can respond to the social consequences of this better than we can respond to the environmental consequences of inaction. And in terms of skills and education, and maybe getting more to your question, of course, upskilling and reskilling is at the core of this, but also reforming the education system, looking at this skills assessment. And of course, Stefano was talking about it before, also Johann, STEM and the more technical aspects are part of that. But we also talk about more social skills, soft skills, critical thinking that will be necessary, because a green transition also includes the transition from more resource intense to more service-based industries. Just to finish up, I think one aspect is also career transition aspects, because in most circumstances it's possible, in others it's not. How do we support career transitions of young people? But how do we also support workers who are at the end of their careers and who might find it more difficult to transition away from the path that they currently have? Because the solution to this is not saying, you know, everyone suddenly needs to reskill or upskill to become a coder. I think that's a very high demand to put on people that have spent 40, 50, 60 years working in a career. And lastly, I think, and this is probably going to be touched on later, but I think entrepreneurial skills and the ecosystem for entrepreneurs is very important to create a conducive environment that supports sustainable businesses, that takes into account the risks that those businesses take, that supports them, and that also fosters an entrepreneurial mindset in the educational system. So it's a whole society approach. There's not one answer, but hopefully those were some aspects.
Thank you very much, Nora. I think we talked, yes, I was really thinking of you, Grete, because you are working with young entrepreneurs. And Nora was talking about entrepreneurship and those things. So I thought that you might want to comment on that. Do we have the skills? Do we have the entrepreneurship? Do we have the right basis for young entrepreneurs to step up and go into the green transition, a more sustainable way of doing businesses? Grete?
If we have it already, I'm not sure, but we are working on it. And as you said, I'm working with Ungt Entreprenørskap or Junior Achievement in Norway, and we work with entrepreneurship, with work readiness, and with financial literacy all over Norway, from primary school to university. And I brought some, so that's why I try to keep the young generations today. But I brought a Norwegian survey made from Norsk Monitor from youth age 16 to 25 to tell what they fear. And 54% say that they fear they don't have enough competence for future jobs. 64% fear youth unemployment. 82% fear contaminations and environmental damage. But as we see when we are out in school every day, we also see that the youths are concerned and that they want to work with sustainability. They don't accept not to work sustainable. So I think that we have to ensure that we develop skills and relevant experience among young people so they are able to contribute in our future workplace. And that is why Junior Achievement is so important, I think. We build skills that all employers are looking for in the future workforce. That is creativity, that is innovation, that is problem solving, that is communication, and that is collaboration. That is the 21st century skills. That's important also for sustainability.
Thank you very much, Grete. And I think I might be wrong, but I would think that maybe the young people are more, it's easier for them to adapt the new systems and new digitalization go into the green transition and retraining and upskill themselves. But what about us who are a little bit older, not old, but a little bit older? And Einar was into that and talking about this, that we have to make sure that that everybody is on board the ship, that everybody feels that this is the way to go forward. And when you think about well, people in the older parts of the career, how can we make sure that also we who are a little bit older are on the same boat? What can we do practically to make sure that nobody is left behind? Because this is I think this is a very important question, and it is a risk. Stefan, you are working on UPM, pulp and paper company, which headquarters is in Finland. Do you experience anything like this in your company? And if you do, what do you do to make sure that everybody is on board?
Well, thank you. That's a good question. Actually, UPM is much more than just pulp and paper. It's a company in transformation. So in a way, we are within the green economy. We are utilizing forest and renewable resources to produce something which is replacing fossil consumption. And to your question of how to keep everyone on board, I think it's very important that we communicate what is the direction of the company. UPM is a 19,000 people company, global company. I have colleagues in more than 50 different countries. So for us, it's very important that we communicate the strategy, the direction this company is going ahead, and that we ensure that we have all the right kind of capabilities in place, and we kind of establish the lifelong learning in everything we do. And I think it's also, for me as a manager, it's also a question of leadership, that I also in these times with the COVID, I need to ensure that we can manage our people in a way that they have their own targets. We keep close contact with them, even though we work on distance, but we have a joint direction and ensure that we sort of people are trusted, and sort of we have, in a way, we have a value also in the company that we say that we trust and we are trusted. So these are, in a way, values I would raise to your question.
How do you have any knowledge about how people are taking this in your company? I mean, are they looking at it as a positive thing, or is it just, no, this doesn't concern me? Or
no, I would say definitely it's a positive thing, and it's very important also that for example in our case, the whole strategy of the company builds on sustainability. The strategy of the company builds on the global challenges we have. So climate change, the lack of resources globally is a driving strategic pattern in our companies, and therefore people are very eager to participate in this journey to create solutions, whether it's then about young people or about older colleagues. I think the sort of the agenda is more or less the same, but maybe there's a difference that younger generations are maybe also driven more and more on based on purpose, and they really want to work with things which also bring global solutions.
Thank you very much. And if we try to look at the bright side, the optimistic side, the positive side still, what kind of opportunities do you see for the labor market as we move on with the green transition? What can we gain from it? What is there in for us? Is there anybody who wants to answer that? What about Iceland? Are you listening? Are you there, David?
Yes, I'm here. Good question. Thank you much. What we see, of course, both with the green transition and also the fourth industrial revolution, we see that jobs are being lost. That's the bad side of it. But at the same time, jobs are being created, and of course that is the good and the bright side of the thing. What we need to do is, of course, the problem is though that people that are losing jobs based on these trends don't necessarily have the skills necessary to take on the jobs that are being created. So to ensure that they are, we need to retrain them and give them the skills that they need for those new jobs. Those are skills, of course, based on digital skills, soft skills, STEM skills, skills in entrepreneurship, and so on. This is something that we need to emphasize to ensure that we are able to make use of all the opportunities that are being created by this. And I think the economic crisis that we're seeing due to the coronavirus are accelerating both of these trends. So this is something that we need to take on. I don't think we would be doing these people, and you mentioned before, Mats, the older generation, we won't be doing them any favors by sending them back into the formal education system. This is something that needs to be done with adult learning, education within companies. I think companies need to be on their toes when it comes to educating their employees and so on. Thank you.
Are we, Grete, and I think I direct this question to you, are we prepared in the Nordic countries for this? Have we a basis that is good enough?
Yes, I think we are very good prepared in the Nordic countries. We also have a long tradition in our labor market to work together, to collaborate, as in the Sustainable Development Goal 17, you know. And we have long traditions in the labor market to collaborate between the employees, the employers, and the national authorities. And that is also needed now, I think. And that's also what we see these days. In junior achievement, we also want to collaborate even more with the businesses and with the labor market. Because if we are going to train youth in skills that are important for work, for future work and for workforce, we have to get competence from businesses, from labor into the school. And we are the bridge build. We are building bridges between schools and future work system and companies. So we need more collaboration, I think, both on the overall system, but also between school and work and business.
Thank you very much. And Nora, you represent the young generation in this panel. So how do you see the future of the labor market? Do you see it as an opportunity, a challenge? Are you scared of it, or how does it look when you try to look into the crystal ball in the future?
I mean, first of all, big responsibility to represent a generation.
No, you represent of course, you represent yourself.
But if we look in the crystal ball, I mean, it's clear where we need to go, and it's quite clear what we need to do. The scary part for me is the lack of planning, the lack of action. Those are the scary parts. Because the roadmap is clear. We have our climate ambitions. We know what some of the aspects of the green transition will mean in terms of loss of jobs, etc. Those are all things that we can plan for. If we put together good policies, good collaboration, a good transformation of our education systems and of our labor markets, those are things that we can solve for. But that also means that we need quite a radical and fast-tracked look at the green transition. It's not something that is many years into the future, because planning for the future starts today, it starts yesterday. So what I'm looking for is I want more policies. And I also think one of the aspects that scares me a bit is there's this dissonance and lack of coherence between environmental and economic policies. We say that we want to achieve certain things as climate ambitions, but we put together economic policies that go in the opposite direction. Tax breaks to fossil fuel companies. What we need to do is to really look at who will be most affected by the shifts that we need to make. It will be older workers, it will be younger workers, it will be people in schools, it will be certain businesses. How do we support and how do we find ways to shift away those investments that we're currently making in things that are not leading us in a good direction in terms of our climate ambitions, and put it where we need for these things for a sustainable future.
Thank you very much, Nora. And one last question, as this is a Nordic event, what is the role of the Nordic cooperation when we're talking about the green transition and the labor market? Is there a role, and what is it? Anybody who wants to, yes, Einar?
Well, I think one of the key elements is the Nordic flexicurity system, because it makes it possible for companies to quick adapt new challenges. It's easy to hire, it's easy to fire. We have a security net under the people who is losing their job. That means that if you give a lot of guts to go into the challenges. So I think one of the elements that we have to be in mind is crucial. This is the flexicurity system, because otherwise there will be a lot of people saying, well, they are talking, but are they talking about me? How can I adapt this? And going to the question, what about the elderly workforce? I think it's necessary to explain what are you becoming, because when you are going to people saying, well, this is a spoonful of medicine, it's good for you. Well, it don't work if they don't know what am I going to be. So using the flexibility and the flexicurity system in the Nordic way, easy hire and firing, security net, and active labor market policy, so that we can give people new skills as soon as they get unemployed, being sure that we have an education system who go into those people's on their own way on understanding, so that they don't go into and feel, what am I doing here? So I'm very, very keen on being close to people. It's okay talking about big economy and all those things if normally people, ordinary people, don't see what's in it for me. So the key element, the Nordic flexicurity system, is a key tool.
Thank you very much, Einar. I think that was the closing point of the panel debate. We went a few minutes over time, but I think it was worth it. So thank you all for an interesting debate, but stay put, because we have some questions, I think, maybe from the audience, if we are lucky, and also from our online viewers. So yeah, stay put. Okay, we have our first question in Copenhagen, so please come up to the microphone and state your name and organization, please.
Hello, my name is Skapa and I am from North Atlantic Gymnasium. And in regards of education, expeditions on the Arctic for students are very important. To understand the climate by studying the ice, land, and the ocean. I went to Students on Ice expedition program in 2018, and that helped me to understand the fundamental of climate change. Why don't we make more of these important expeditions and make it more worldwide for everyone to join and learn? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is anybody ready to answer this question out there? I must admit that I didn't hear it so well, so I can't comment on it. It was the loud wasn't so good. Anybody out there, did you hear it? No? Would you like to repeat, or just short, please, if you can?
Yeah, basically, this is my question is expeditions are not really big in the Arctic, and I want to know why we don't expand the education on on the Arctic with ice, studying the climate change, and make it worldwide so everyone has to join.
So you're talking about education about the Arctic. I think these panelists maybe not. It's not really their issue. So I'm sorry to say you have to direct that question to somebody else, because this is concerning labor market and the green transition. So I think that it might be a little bit hard for our panelists to answer it, if it's okay with you. If
but
you don't,
but it was a wise question.
Yeah,
because it's the area where you can easily see what's happening. If you go to Greenland and look how much the ice have moved. Yep. So this is where you can see it with your own eyes and feel it with your own hands. So it's a wise question. I don't have the answer. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. We have to get back to that question. Anybody else in our hubs? Yes, I see a hand in Helsinki. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I want to thank you for a very interesting debate so far. I have a question about education. I know that you have touched upon it already, but I would like to know what concrete can be done to ensure that the education system is up to speed and future-proof. So maybe if Grete could start answering this. Thank you.
Yes, I can try, even if just a little organization which is not part of the education system in Norway, but we are invited to join the education system. And what is positive in Norway is that we, from this autumn, got a new curricula in school, which also includes sustainability as an overall theme for all the subjects at school. So I think the education system is adjusting to our agenda and also to what the businesses are doing, what politics are doing. We all see that there has to be collaboration in this area, and as what I see, school are inviting also actors like Junior Achievement into school to work in a practical way with sustainability. And when we are ready in Norway, but we're also ready in all the other Nordic countries. So we want to work with youth in each part of the school system with sustainability, and I think we are invited in too. But that's also a question on resources.
Thank you very much, Grete. And we have one question online, which I hope that somebody can answer. So here it is. How is it possible to have a coherent strategy towards a green society and industry if we still have a consensus on economic growth? Is this something somebody wants to take on? Doesn't look like that. This is too hard. I read it once again just to make sure. How is it possible to have a coherent strategy towards a green society and industry if we still have a consensus on economic growth? Stefan, it might look like you have your hand up.
Yeah, I could give it a try, even though I maybe answer from the point of view from the company I represent. So clearly, in the future also, there will be consumption, and we need to manufacture products because we as people, we will need products that we consume. So it's very much about how do we do products, what kind of raw materials we use, and what kind of consumption are we replacing with something which is more sustainable. And definitely there is a lot of good business also in the green agenda. And for companies, sort of the big purpose is to be profitable and to grow. But for sure, we need to admit that some kind of industries and some kind of jobs will also be lost during these times. But societies also, the costs of societies are constantly increasing. If I look on the Nordic countries, we need to finance those social costs and the costs of the society. And the only way to finance that is through economic activity and economic growth in these countries. But we can do it sustainably, we can do it responsibly. And I think the company I'm representing is one good example of that.
Thank you very much, and I think we are running out of time. Sorry, I see you, Nora, but we are running out of time, so I have to cut this debate. And thank you all for a very, very interesting discussion. And that means that we have reached the grande finale. So I thank you, Aina. You can step down. And I once again thank all the panelists, and I would like to welcome our key listeners, because we have had 2 young key listeners following both debates today. And they are now going to comment on some of the points that they have picked up from during the day, during these debates. So just let me introduce Barbara Gårdlycke here beside me, who is a former president of the Nordic Youth Council. And I think we should have Una Hildadottir, who is a president of the National Youth Council of Iceland. In Iceland, there we have you. I hope you hear us loud and clear. So, if I start with you, Barbara, what is your reaction on what you have heard today? Do you have some key points that you want to comment on, please?
Yeah. And first of all, thank you for inviting me here and also hosting this very important and necessary event. When I spoke to you earlier today, Mats, you asked me to elaborate a bit about if any of the points that were made here sparked any hope for the future. And I've been trying to keep this in mind while I've been listening. And I will say the answer to that is both yes and no. I will say yes, because there have been a lot of good points, a lot of good ideas. I think many of the speakers have shown that they are eager to provide solutions for the green transition. But I will also say that I'm a little bit cautious. I remember that the first keynote speaker made a point that was the green transition is not canceled, it's just postponed. And that was something that made me feel, well, I will say a little bit disappointed, because it's exactly this kind of thinking that leads to us being in this situation today, because we have postponed the green transition for way too long. And if there's one thing I hope that people will take home with them after today, is that we cannot postpone the green transition anymore.
Thank you very much. Una, what's your reactions, immediate reactions of today's debates?
Well, I actually wrote a essay. I will try to keep this short, but what I found, especially in the second part of the debate, is that what's actually missing from this conversation is education. We have had 2 questions about education from our guests. And I think it's really important that we remember that we can't really talk about this job sector without including education. And what I want to see, especially in the future, going forward, is that we need to work more on a Nordic level with more cooperation between universities and especially long-distance learning. We have to open up a window or a chance for, Barbara in Denmark, that she can study Arctic studies in the University of Iceland without having to come here. And we've had some experience with long-distance learning and education because of COVID. And I think we should take that experience and move forward to opening up chances for young people to study more and educate themselves, especially when it comes to sustainability, and work together between universities to try and opening this up, because education is something that we need to have in mind when we're talking about the future of the job market. And especially when it comes to, we're talking about this green future and this new job market that we are talking about here today. And the big question is the education system ready for it? Are we forgetting to update the curriculums when it comes to, all ages of education and school systems? Are we ready to move forward with the needs of the job sector?
Are you, and what are your answers? Do you have any answers? Are we ready, especially when we're talking educational systems?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Yes.
From your perspective.
I don't think so. What we hear here in Iceland, we have the climate strikes, and one of the big points that they are saying, the children who are taking part, is that there is no education on sustainability in their curriculum or in school, in their school level. And it's also that we are talking about creating jobs, which are kind of a vital part of the future. And I don't think that we have enough people going and studying to perfect those skills. And I think it's also important that the job sector looks more into evaluating this experience and non-formal learning that you can find within the third sector and youth organizations and use that when they are hiring people.
Thank you very much. Barbara, well, one last question. How do you see the future looking, say, 20 years ahead?
I think that's difficult, but I would like to stress the point that Nora also made, that the scary part about right now is that we lack planning and we lack action. So I think it's difficult to see ahead because we need to start planning today. And as Nora said, we need to start yesterday. Actually, we do not need to postpone. But I definitely hope that we will start the green transition right away, and that so that we can, and I also agree with Una. I also really have to say that she made an excellent point about education. We need to include all kinds of education. We need to implement sustainable thinking within the education and with also, of course, all other sectors as well. I think it's a little bit difficult to answer the question about 20 years ahead, because I think it's also unsure right where we are standing today. So unfortunately, I cannot answer that
It's
question.
understandable, but very strong messages, very good comments on what's happened today. So I thank you very much both. And I hope that people have listened to you and that something will happen in the near future. No postponing is the message from here.
Sorry.
So I would like to thank everybody. I would like to thank the participants, the panelists, the keynote speakers, the keynote listeners and the audience and everybody out there. And but you better stay tuned, because we now take a break, but we are back with new debates in 1 hour. So thank you very much and see you.